With Dragonflight's release, I know there's a lot of people coming to the healing role for the first time or returning after long breaks, so in this video I want to give you guys 5 tips that I think will really help you as you get started with Mythic Plus, and these are 5 things that I know would have really helped me if someone would have told me when I first started. My first tip is actually going to be your mindset. I was considering putting this last because it's not gameplay related, but it's honestly the most important key to your improvement. From my experiences, there are often 2 types of healers. Those that think everything is their fault and those that think nothing is their fault. Let's start with the first one. The healer role is the second most criticized role after tanks, and you will, at times, hear the classic line, "Where are my heals?" But know that you're not responsible for every death in a run. Your teammates will mess up mechanics at times and often won't even realize it and assume it's your fault. My best advice here is to honestly just ignore them. Treat the pugs in your group like bots. It's kind of like imagining the audience naked in public speaking, but it's even more anonymous because chances are you're never going to see these people again, and if you keep playing and gaining confidence, you'll be doing way higher keys than them anyway, as they remain complacent and stay toxic. Now, if you're playing in an organized group and your team members are being overly critical and not allowing you the space to learn, I'd honestly say just dump them for another group, as you're probably not going to get much better in a team like that anyway. Don't beat yourself up over every death, even if it was your fault. Just get back on that horse and try again and treat it as a learning experience. The only way to ensure you won't improve is to not try. On the other hand, for the healers that insist people only die because they're incompetent, you need to be able to admit when something is your fault so you can fix it for the next time. If you're honestly unsure, the absolute biggest piece of advice I can give you is to record your own play and watch it back. You'll be amazed at what you notice that might have flown over your head in the moment. But yes, like literally everything in life, you get better at healing by trying and failing over and over. Okay, for number 2, I'll stop trying to be your WoW psychiatrist and talk gameplay stuff now. It's easy to say, learn your class, so I want to break it down a little more. Learn your class layer by layer. WoW specs can be a little complicated, and if you try to master everything at once, you're just gonna kinda suck at everything. You're a healer, so start with that. Forget damage and utility and everything else for a bit. Find a good guide on YouTube or Wowhead or wherever, and learn what heals you're supposed to be using. Make sure you find a solid talent build and just go with it, as you can make your own modifications later once you know what you're doing. Focus entirely on that until you got the hang of it. Another thing I like to do is look at my healing breakdown and the details add-on and compare it with the player on Warcraft logs to make sure I'm using the right heals. Once you got that down, figure out your utility spells. How can you use them to make a dungeon easier? And then once you've got all that down, look at damage. Start incorporating damage into your play bit by bit as you become more comfortable with healing. Don't try to go full Mongo DPS all at once or your healing will suffer. Once you've got the general idea of how your abilities work, go deeper. Look on your guides for advanced tips that allow you to make some gains in the margins. Try to find a streamer spirit animal that vibes with you and watch their play, trying to imitate it. Learn from them. Number 3 is cooldowns. Cooldowns, cooldowns, cooldowns. Use them like crazy. Use them as close to on cooldown that reasonably makes sense that you can. Early on, it might seem like you don't need them that much, but you need to get used to using them because when you graduate to higher keys, you'll find that's about how often you'll need them. Instead of thinking of cooldowns as emergency buttons, start to think of them as a resource. Mythic Plus is a timed environment. If you've got a 30-minute dungeon and a 3-minute cooldown that makes healing an absolute breeze for 30 seconds, you want to try and get as many uses as possible over the course of the 30 minutes that makes sense. That's more time you're maybe spending doing some DPS yourself, allowing DPS and tanks to focus on killing things instead of their survival, and mana you're likely saving. As you gain more experience in dungeons, you'll also learn which situations necessitate cooldowns from you and which ones work best in different situations, which is different for every class. Just remember that the longer a cooldown sits on your action bar doing nothing, the more of a valuable resource you're wasting. Number 4 is going to be getting a functional UI. You don't need anything fancy. The biggest thing I'd say are musts are having your party frames somewhere very accessible to you, having party frames that display necessary information for healers like what heal over time, spells, or buffs you have on that person, and what debuffs they have on them. This can be done with the base Blizzard UI or a custom UI like Elv UI. Also, make sure that whatever add-on UI you use to achieve this, you're using mouse over casts for your heals. In the base Blizzard UI, this is as simple as going into your combat interface options and checking mouse over cast. This is incredibly important, as it's going to allow you to keep unfriendly units targeted for offensive spells and to heal your allies without actually targeting them. Another huge one is having a heads-up weakaura display. What I mean by this is that you have your important abilities and cooldowns you need to keep track of, basically right smack dab in the middle of your screen by your character, so your eyes don't need to jump around away from the combat on screen to look when an ability is going to be ready. This is going to allow you to better focus on mechanics and your rotation at the same time. When you move into hierarchies, I'd also recommend an add-on like OmniCD to keep track of your party members' cooldowns, as that can be very useful information to know when it comes to who to heal when. That's a bit advanced and down the line a bit for a video like this. If you like the UI you see on video, check out the join button as it's available to channel members along with the video on how to install it. The last one's going to be keybinds. While to some extent keybinds are personal preference, there's definitely some universal truths to them, and while changing your hotkeys to be more optimal might be a temporary setback as you get used to them, it will be a huge gain in the long run. I've seen way too many people rely way too heavily on the number keys for their keybinds. Here's how I recommend you use them. Put your first 3 fingers on W, A, and D. Those along with S are your default movement keys, and while opinions may vary here, I think they're fine. The buttons closest and most accessible to these should be bound to spells you use a lot. For example, look at the accessibility of the E key versus the 8 key. Take some time to map out keybinds that will allow you to always reach the abilities you're looking for as quickly as possible. Once you feel like you've filled all the keys that you feel are accessible to you, start using them over again with modifiers like Shift and Control. Also, if you've got any spare mouse buttons aside from left and right click, or even mouse scroll, these are excellent places to bind some spells, particularly instant cast spells. They're extremely accessible to your fingers, so don't forget about them. It might take some getting used to at first when you change keybinds, but once you get used to them, it will make you a better player in the long run. Alright, bonus tip number 6, the ABC rule. Always be casting. Every time you cast an ability and there's that momentary downtime before you can cast something else, that's called a global cooldown. You should be casting something literally every global cooldown that allows you to do so. Do not sit there waiting for someone to take damage. If no one needs healing, cast damage spells or use your utility or CC the pack. Just make sure you're doing something. Again, when you think about it logically, anytime you have the ability to be casting a spell and you're not, you're wasting resources. Just don't overspam heal spells and burn all your mana for no reason. Once you learn your damage rotation, it will be much easier to make sure you can fill every global with something useful. So those are my tips for healers just getting started in Mythic Plus. If you like the video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to see more of my videos in the future. If you got any questions, go ahead and leave it in the comment section or check out my live stream right here on YouTube, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 9 p.m. Pacific, where I do my best to answer any questions people have in chat as well. Good luck in M+, guys. Happy healing, and I'll see you in the next one.